Hey friends, welcome back to Social Studies. Today we have been talking about fairy tales. We have read so far Sleeping Beauty, Rumpelstiltskin, Rapunzel, and there were 2 parts that we read for the Frog Prince. And today we're going to read another story. But let's go back a little bit and think about what we've been talking about. So we've been talking about fairy tales, right? And we know that fairy tales have usually like a royal family somewhere in there. They might have a magical element, like a witch that can do spells, or fairies or something like that. We've learned that not all of it is true. It's like fantasy. Some of it's fantasy. Like some things really could happen from the fairy tale, but then there's things that really couldn't happen, like the frog that talked. So we knew that couldn't really happen. So today's story, and just like all the other stories we've read, there's a problem in our story, right? And in today's problem, or today's story, Hansel and Gretel, it's a brother and a sister who have a problem that have to be solved. So you might know the story of Hansel and Gretel, but if you don't, that's okay, because we're going to read it in just a second. But I want you to kind of think, what kind of problems would a brother and sister like have in a fairy tale? What problems might they have? So I want you to listen really carefully as we read today to see what the problem Hansel and Gretel have and how they have to solve the problem, okay? Or how they have to try to solve the problem. So let's get started. Share my screen with you all. See if I can. All right. You ready? Here we go. So this here is Hansel and Gretel, and these are their parents. Okay. Once upon a time, near a deep, dark forest, there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife. So here's the woodcutter and his wife, and then his 2 children. The boy was named Hansel, and the girl was named Gretel. The family never had much to eat, and now, when times were hard, people around the land were starving, and the poor woodcutter could not get enough food to feed his family. As he lay in bed one night, tossing and turning with worry, he turned to his wife and said, "What is going to happen to us? How can we feed our poor children when we haven't got enough to feed ourselves?" So, how do you think they're going to solve the problem? Like, how's the woodsman and the wife going to solve the problem that they can't have enough to eat? Okay, so let's keep reading. "Listen to me," said his wife. "Early tomorrow morning," the cold-hearted woman said, so she was very unkind, "we'll take the children deep into the woods. We'll give each of them a piece of bread and make a fire. Then we'll leave them and go about our work. They won't find the way home in time for dinner, and we'll eat their share." "No," said the man, "I cannot do that. I cannot leave my children alone in the woods, where there are wild animals. It will get dark and cold as the sun sets." "Then you are a fool," snapped the woman. "You might as well accept that we will all starve." Then she nagged the poor man and scolded him and kept at him until at last he agreed. "But I feel sorry for my poor children," he said quietly. The 2 children were so hungry that they had not been able to sleep, and so they heard everything their stepmother said to their father. Gretel cried, but Hansel whispered, "Don't worry, I will think of something." And when their parents had gone to sleep, Hansel got up, put on his little coat, and sneaked outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the pebbles that lay in front of the house, glittered like silver coins. So the little pebbles sparkled. Hansel stooped and filled his pockets of his coat with as many pebbles as it would hold. Then he tiptoed back to bed and said to Gretel, "Go to sleep, little sister." So why do you think he gathered all those little pebbles? Let's keep reading and find out. At daybreak, so when it first becomes light in the morning, the woman came and woke the 2 children. "Get up, you lazy bones. We're going to the forest to get some wood." She gave them each a piece of bread and said, "That's your food for the day. Don't eat it all at once, because it's all you're going to get. Supper after we return from the woods. That is, if you are home in time." So do you think they're going to be home in time for supper? If the stepmom's plan is right, then they won't come home for supper, will they? Gretel carried both pieces of bread in her apron, for Hansel's pockets were full of pebbles. They all started out on their way to the forest. As they walked, Hansel kept turning around and looking back at the house again and again. His father said, Hansel, what are you looking at? You must watch where you're going. Oh, said Hansel, I'm just looking at my little white kitten sitting on the roof of the house to say goodbye. So do you think he was really looking at his kitten? Why do you think he said that? Oh, let's keep reading and find out. The wife said, You little fool, that's not your kitten. That's just the sun shining on the chimney. Now come along. But Hansel stayed a few steps behind and kept turning. And each time he turned, he dropped a pebble from his pocket to mark the way. Oh, so he's trying to have a little path home. When they were deep in the forest, the father said, Gather some firewood, children. I will start a fire so you won't get cold while we work. Hansel and Gretel gathered a little mountain of twigs and sticks, and when the fire was burning, the wife said, Stay by the fire, you two. We have to go and cut wood. When we're finished, we'll come to get you. Are they really coming back? Not according to what we heard. So Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. After a time, they ate their bread, and after a longer time, they got so tired that they closed their eyes and fell asleep. When they woke, it was dark, and they were all alone. Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her, so he tried to make her feel better. Wait a little until the moon rises, he said. All right. Let's see. When the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which glittered like silver coins, and showed them the way. So we know this full moon is really big and bright, right? So all the light from the moon was shining on those pebbles and made it glitter. They could see their way home. They walked on through the night, and at last, at the break of day, they came to their father's house. They knocked on the door, and when the woman opened it, she was shocked. So she was really surprised to see Hansel and Gretel. But all she said was, Why, there you are! Why did you stay so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming home again. Why do you think she said that? Do you think she was really being genuine? Of course, their father was glad to see them, for it had broken his heart to leave them alone. Not very long afterwards, times were hard again, and there was little food to eat. Again, the children heard their stepmother say to their father one night, There's nothing left but half a loaf of bread. After that, we're done. We don't have enough food for ourselves and the children. This time we'll take them so deep in the forest that they won't find their way back for a week. But, wife, said the man with a heavy heart, it would be better to share our last bite of food with the children. But the wife would not listen to him, and she knew if she kept at him, could get him to give in and agree with her plan as she did before. Very nice person, is she? Much later, when their parents were asleep, Hansel got up to collect pebbles just as he did before, but he couldn't get out. His stepmother had figured out how they found their way home last time and had locked the door. So Hansel got back in bed and tried to think of a different plan. So what do you think his plan's going to be this time? Early the next morning, the woman roused the children out of bed. She gave them a piece of bread, even smaller than before. As they walked into the woods, Hansel broke up the bread in his pocket, and every once in a while he stopped to throw a crumb on the ground. Hansel, said his father, what do you keep stopping and looking back for? I'm looking at a little pigeon that's sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me, answered Hansel. So do you think that's really what he's looking at? No, but he doesn't want to get caught, right? Little fool, said the wife. It's not a pigeon. It's only the sun shining on the chimney. So they walked on, and Hansel dropped breadcrumbs all along the way. The woman led the children deeper into the forest than they had ever been in all their lives. Again, they gathered sticks for a fire, and the woman said, Sit there, children, and when you're tired, go to sleep. We're going to cut wood, and when we're finished, we'll come get you. Later, when it was lunchtime, Gretel shared her small piece of bread with Hansel because he had left his crumbs along the path. Then they fell asleep. As the evening came, no one came to get them. When they woke, it was dark. They were all alone. When the moon rose, they started for home, but they could not find the breadcrumbs. The birds had eaten them up. Come, Gretel, said Hansel, I know we can find our way. They couldn't find it. They went on all night and the next day from morning until evening, but they could not find their way out of the forest. They were terribly hungry, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries. When they were so tired that they could drag themselves no further, they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. So, what do you think is going to happen next? I'm not going to tell you what's next because we're going to stop there. We're going to have to finish it tomorrow. Ah! So, think about our story. Let's go back and talk about what we did so far. So, what problems do Hansel and Gretel have in the story? They have no food to eat. Their mom or their stepmom and their dad leave them in the forest, and they get lost, right? They got lost in the woods now. Why do the woodcutter and his wife plan to leave Hansel and Gretel in the woods? They don't have enough food, so they've decided that they're just going to leave the in the woods, and so they're going to be selfish and keep the food for themselves and not feed the children. What does Hansel do when he hears the plan to leave him and Gretel in the woods? He gathers up the pebbles and he makes a little path for them to follow home. Okay, so at first, does Hansel's plan for solving the problem being left in the woods work? Yes, it does, because the pebbles that glittered in the moonlight. All right, so how does the stepmother feel when she sees Hansel and Gretel returned? She was shocked, wasn't she? She was surprised. She was like, what? So what does she do the next time she plans to leave him in the woods? She locks their door so that he can't go get pebbles again. What is Hansel's plan the next time he hears that him and Gretel will be left deep in the woods? So they drop breadcrumbs to make a path instead of rocks this time. Does his plan for solving the problem of being left in the woods work this time? Not this time. Why not? Because the birds ate the bread. All right, how would you describe Hansel? I think he's kind of brave, maybe clever. You might have another. All right, so go into Google Classroom, answer your questions, and then tomorrow we will finish up part 2 of Hansel and Gretel, okay? All right, friends, if you have any questions, email me or message me. See you later. Bye.